Hello and welcome to the Financial Puzzle Playbook with your host, Jim Sumpter. I'm RJ Malik, producer of this podcast, and we're continuing our discussion about the 6 puzzle pieces. And Jim, I see you have a guest, so why don't you introduce her and take it away?
I do. Thank you, RJ. It's great to see you on this nice spring day. We're finally getting some nice weather without cold and snow and all that sort of stuff. So today we're going to, I guess our puzzle piece will be cash flow. Which we've spent a lot of time on, but it's, as I've emphasized so many times, it's so important. And what we're going to talk about is maybe creating specific goals and specifically creating experiences that are memorable for your family. So the guest we have today is Amanda Callahan. And Amanda is the advisor facing event coordinator at RFG Advisory. She also has a history of being an event planner, specifically weddings and other types of events. So what we're going to do in lieu of time is we're going to do a 2-part series. Part 1, we're going to focus specifically on weddings, engagements, rehearsal dinners, things like that. And then we're going to move to part 2, which we'll talk about other events. So Amanda, first of all, welcome.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, because you've got quite a background in wedding planning. I know today specifically you work with a lot of corporate events and work with advisors and some of our company events, things like that. But you haven't always done that. And so you've been a wedding planner for quite a bit of time, and you also have your own company where you do that. And so kind of tell us your background real quick, and then we'll just kind of jump into this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. So I got my start really in wedding planning and venue management. For me, it was always about connecting with them and making it personal. And if you couldn't do that, then you don't care about it, right? And so I really spent a lot of time planning weddings for years before I decided to kind of branch off and get into the corporate world. So that's really where I got my start. And that was almost 15 years ago, if I am showing my age there a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, what I would hope is that advisors, when you work with us, we are not brides, because I know the stereotype of sometimes a bride or a bride's mom can be very interesting with wedding planning. And so hopefully we are a little easier to work with.
So much easier.
In that respect. Right. Okay. Let's jump into weddings just a second. Okay. So I've gotten engaged it's Saturday night. I've gotten engaged. We've had all the videos. It's been all over social media, stuff like that. Monday morning rolls around and we're like, oh my gosh, we have a wedding to plan. Where do you start?
So I always would start with, where is the budget? What is the budget?
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you are a millionaire, you still have a budget. If that budget is still $1 million, you don't want to spend more than $1 million.
Okay.
So what does that budget look like for you? And it's going to be different for everyone, but what does that budget look like?
Okay. So we defined this budget. Okay. And then what, as you and I were sort of prepping for this podcast, we talked about a lot of things. And, as a dad, I have not had a wedding yet, although I do think there's probably 2 of them coming at some point. And so I'm going to be ready for that. What I've been doing is just sort of saving money.
Right.
And that's where this cash flow comes in. I don't know specifically, well, how much is the dress? How much is this? How much is the catering and all that? That's once we get engaged, then we move on into that step.
That's right.
What I'm doing right now is I'm just sort of saving a dollar amount, trying to hit a target, which hopefully we hit that target and not go over that target, but hopefully that happens. But we shall see. So you've sat down, we've talked about a budget. What are the next 1 or 2 steps of things that you have to plan for? We were talking about venue, we're talking about catering, photographers, all that. I'm assuming that you can't, get engaged on a Saturday and be ready and be married in 2 months and have all of your dream places, because they're going to all be gone. So where does venue come in? What are you as a wedding planner trying to get people to think about?
Yeah. So typically venues book out a year in advance.
Wow. Okay.
Especially for the more popular ones, right? And we're seeing more and more that your popular wedding months maybe used to be June, May, June, are now October, those cooler months. Now we are in the South, so we do compete with football on Saturdays.
It's very important that we there's certain days that we cannot have a wedding on.
That's right. You can't. But those venues are booking out a year in advance. And so if there's somewhere where you just dreamed forever about getting married, you really need to plan ahead of the availability of that venue.
Okay. And so if someone doesn't know, they sort of have this vision in their head of the type of, I want indoor, I want outdoor, I want leaves, I don't want leaves, I want the beach, things like that. What types of questions are you asking? What should people be thinking about as they're getting ready for this?
Yeah. So I always ask 2 questions. The first is, what is your vision?
Okay.
What do you see? What is it that you have dreamed about? When you picture yourself standing up there, where do you see it? And like you said, is it the beach? Is it the city? What is your backdrop? And then what is most important to you?
Okay.
If you are a bride or if you are a couple that does not care about flowers, then don't spend 10 grand on flowers or whatever that cost is, right? So if you don't want to see something, don't do it.
Okay, so let me ask you a follow-up to that. If you, so I was actually having this conversation with Cassidy, who at some point, will be talking about this. We were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her. I said, because she's in college, she's in a sorority, so I just asked the question. I said, when you get married, how many people do you think will be in your bridal party? And I was a little surprised at the number of people that are in her vision in her bridal party. Okay. So does the number of people in the bridal party increase budget? Does it change where your venue is? Is that something that's important to determine in the beginning, or can we determine that as we move on the process?
I definitely think it's something to consider, but it's not a deal breaker on venue or things like that, right?
Okay.
So your guest count will include the bridal party.
Okay.
So it will affect budget, but it's not a make or break type thing. And then on venue, it's just something to think about positioning, right?
Okay.
So when we're looking at the space, do we have enough space? Can we alternate people? So it's just something to consider.
Okay. One of the phrases that you used the other day, because I asked you, I said, okay, Amanda, what's the purpose of a wedding planner? Just a very general question. And you said, we handle the things that you would never think about.
That's right.
Okay. So with regards to budget, with regards to number of people in the wedding party, venues, what are some things that we would never think about that are really important to know?
Yeah. I mean, rain plan.
Okay.
If you have an outdoor wedding or reception, what is that rain plan like? Because you can't just call the week of and get a tent or get, tables or whatever that looks like. So you really need to have that in your back pocket, teed up and ready to go should you need to pull the plug.
Okay. Yeah. That's something I would not have thought about.
And
so this is the whole point.
Yeah. Affect your budget because tents are not very cheap.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What about photographers? This one, when we were having this discussion, I was like, wait a minute, what?
I think I opened your eyes to some things.
You totally did.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this whole photographer thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So photographers are another one that book up really quickly.
Okay.
Because with social media and all of that, photographers are getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of highlight. There's a style that comes with each photographer. So as a bride or as a couple, you might see something and say, that's really what I want everything to look like. You might have more lifestyle photography. You might have more motion photography. Do you like more black and whites, color, things like that? So photographers are very important. It will document the entire day. So you want to have someone that you work really well with, but they book up really far in advance.
Okay. When you say really far, are you saying a year and a half,
more,
6 months?
That's
what?
right. A year or more.
Year or more.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned lifestyle. What is that? Describe that to me. Because because again, I'm going to be the guy that says, okay, here's the budget. I'm not going to want to be in the weeds trying to figure all this out.
Right.
But I want to know.
That's right.
So what is lifestyle? What do you mean by that?
So lifestyle is more, I would say more movement. So picture your old school JCPenney posed, everyone standing there, very rigid. Lifestyle is going to be very fluid. It's going to be a lot of walking and dancing and just a lot of movement is going to be more lifestyle. You're not going to have all those posed, very rigid photos.
So more candid type things.
That's right. Yeah.
So when I think of weddings, I think, okay, you get everybody there. Okay, all bride's side, come up. Okay,
That's right.
you do that. Okay, now you all go back. Now let's have the groom's side. Okay, now how many grandmas do we have? Now the grandmothers come up. So you're saying, are you doing that and the lifestyle, which I would think of more as candid type things? Or are you seeing both or
Yeah.
what?
So it's kind of a nice mixture of both. And I'm not a photographer, connoisseur, I would say. But it's a little bit of both. So you'll still have some of those, what I've called kind of Christmas card poses where grandma does want of the whole family, but you might have everyone walking towards the photographer. So everyone is smiling and laughing, and you might have someone, holding hands on this side, and then someone else, might be spinning on this side. It's just going to be a lot of fluid motion where it's not so posed.
Okay. Let me ask you this. And I'm not lumping all brides into one group, but in general, when you're sitting down with somebody, are these things that a 21, 22, 23-year-old girl has thought about? And they're saying, well, this is what I want. What does that look like?
It's very rare now to meet a bride in that age category that does not already know what type of photographer.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
They have already scoped out what style they want. They're already on, the Instagram pages and looking at all these photographers and looking at other weddings, and really they know what they want.
Okay. So you got a photographer. Okay. Then apparently in today's world, you have to have a videographer because we have to, we're doing the poses, but then we're also capturing the whole thing.
That's right. Yeah.
With the videos and all that. So do photographers and videographers come as a package? Are you getting one and then getting the other? What happens there?
So sometimes there are companies that provide both the photographer and the videographer, and they work really well together. And I always encourage that because your styles are going to be the same and you don't have one opposing versus the other. And so you really know what you're going to get. But it's not always true that way. You may have another vendor that is the videographer, and then you may have a photographer that you just really love, and they're going to do all the pictures.
Is that something that you would maybe give guidance along the way and help the bride? Okay, these are things that you should consider.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Then you really threw me with this one. Okay. We have to, apparently in today's wedding world, we have to have a social media expert. And my first question to you is, are you kidding me that we have to
I wish I were.
We have to do this. Okay. So as a dad, because I'm sitting in this meeting going, wait a minute, I know about a photographer, videographer I can get behind. Right. What is a social media expert? What does that person do? And why is it important in today's wedding planning
That's right.
world?
And the key word is why it is important to today and to the demographics today. What may not be important to me has nothing to do with what is important to that bride, right? And so just because of the world that we're in, social media is everything. And so where weddings years ago were geared towards family and hosting the family and friends, not that that has gone away, but it really is, how can we get this photo op? How can we have a backdrop that my friends and family can pose in front of? What's going to be the hashtags? What's going to be, the kind of reel that is built for Instagram and whatnot. So now you have someone on site really doing all of this, not necessarily B-roll, but you've got someone out there specifically filming and capturing just for social media.
Okay. What do you mean by B-roll?
So you might have a social media director or social media person on site with their phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then they edit it to the reels and to all of the things that all the young ones know that I may not really know.
I'm going through and you're a part of the marketing group at RFG Advisory. And as I've said before, I had for the first 26 and a half years of my career, I really didn't do a lot of marketing. Mm-hmm. Now I'm starting to do marketing. Yeah. I'm starting to be on social media with CMC Financial. Mm-hmm. So this social media word is not foreign to me. I am learning the importance of it because in this generation, it is very, very important.
It really is.
So does the photographer only do the pictures, the videographer only do the video, or do they work together when the bride and the groom, they get their end product?
They generally don't work together.
Okay.
So you will get a finished product from every single one of them.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Am I still getting the book that lays on the grandma's coffee table that says, here was the wedding of my
For a
granddaughter
separate cost.
for a separate
Yeah,
cost. Okay.
yeah.
Well, everything has a cost, of course.
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Okay. All right. So one other thing that we have to consider that we don't really think about is, people coming from out of town. One of the things you brought up is if at your reception there's alcohol, you might want to make sure that there's transportation to get people from point A to point B. Talk to me about that as a wedding planner. What are you talking to brides about, talking to grooms about, talking to families about with regard to that?
Yeah. So generally, this is a conversation that comes up when we're selecting venues.
Okay.
So if we are selecting a venue that is in the heart of downtown
Mhm.
and there's plenty of hotel options, there are plenty of Ubers and Lyft and things like that, then it doesn't become so much of an issue, right? Because we can say, okay, encourage everyone to take an Uber, or you might be walking around the block after your wedding to go to the bar or go out somewhere with your friends. So that's not always the biggest deal. If you've got, those farm weddings or, that's a little bit of a drive. Sometimes the country clubs are even farther outside of town.
Mhm.
And so you don't want to put your guests in a position where they have been drinking for 4 or 5 hours on top of what they've been drinking during the day, because that bridal party is going to have a good time, generally, in my experience. And so you just don't want that pressure, right? So it is a really nice thing to do to organize transportation for them, have that passenger bus, have that trolley bus, do something for them so they don't have to worry about driving afterwards.
Right. Well, I think that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
Again, something that you might not think about until after the fact.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm assuming those sorts of venues and cost and services, they book up too.
They do.
Yeah.
They absolutely
And so you have all, and are you helping guide and getting all these things booked along the way?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So I generally will kind of handle all the vendor management, right? Where I'm like, here's your proposal of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And then do you want to go with it or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And from in a general sense, I'm not asking for specifics, but in a general sense, is an event planner for a wedding, is that a percentage cost? Is it a dollar cost? Does it totally vary?
It does vary. So generally it's sort of a flat rate depending on the package, right?
Okay.
So if you want full wedding planning services, including all the vendor management, all of the, sourcing on top of invitation creation and cake tastings and all of that, that's going to be a higher price point, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want more of a month of, because a lot of wedding planners used to do day of, which
Mhm.
is not even a real thing.
Okay.
You can't show up on the day of and try to piece together what has been happening. You have been working for the weeks leading up to that. So really it's month of.
Okay.
And that's going to be a little bit lower of a price point. However, when we see these weddings that are production weddings is what I like to call them, where you have, you might have a tent build, you might have a lot of moving parts, custom pieces, custom bar pieces, a lot of marketing actually for the wedding. That leans itself more to a percentage base.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
can be, some planners do it differently. It can be something, whereas if that is my intellectual property, then I'm going to charge a percentage on top of that vendor for that.
Okay. Okay. So really, when you're talking about budget, which is what we started with the very, very
Mhm.
beginning, or we talk about the puzzle piece of cash flow where you're planning for this event,
Mhm.
really what you have to do is you have to incorporate your event planner as a part of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just the dress, the photographer, the church, and where's going to be the reception
Nope.
like it used to be. It is amazing how this industry has evolved and the amount of money
Yes.
that is spent on weddings.
Yes. Which is why I try to remind my brides and my couples to be in the moment,
Right.
because it goes by like that.
Right. Right. What are you seeing in general? Some things that people are always gravitating to, or maybe beginning to gravitate away from?
I think that's a hard question because trends are always going to be there, right?
Okay.
So, in 2013 to probably 2016, we saw every barn, every mason jar, every burlap runner you could possibly think of.
Okay.
Now, if a mason jar shows up somewhere, people are running for the hills, right?
Okay.
So now I think things are leaning a bit more towards the classic route. So things are going a little bit more traditional, where we've got soft color palettes and, very traditional invitations and things like that. I think that is coming back, but things are just an ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
And social media does influence that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, are you seeing and this may vary all over the place, are you seeing the size of the wedding be?
I would say we are in the South, and so that guest number is going to remain high while also wanting all of the things.
Okay.
So it sometimes comes down to a very hard conversation of you can have all of those things if you're willing to spend the money, or you need to cut your guest count down in order to get those things. I think that's a true Southern tradition of just having really large weddings. I will say some of the younger ones are coming around now saying, I don't want to do 300 people. I would rather pocket some of the money and spend it on something else, or, whatever that looks like, and have a smaller, more intimate situation.
And that's where I go back to, if you're sitting down with a 21, 22, 23-year-old who's gotten engaged, who's excited because this is the biggest moment of their life.
Up until this point.
Until this point. Right. And you're sitting down with them. They think they know, but maybe they don't really know what they don't know.
That's right.
And that's where and your expertise and stuff, you're able to kind of give some guidance along the way.
And it's about managing people too, right? So I might be sitting with a 21-year-old who knows what she wants, but there might be a mother there who says, no, this is what I want. And so it's constantly touching back into that bride to say, are you okay with this? And realizing too where the money probably is coming from. So there's a respect line, but constantly touching in with that bride, like, what do you want me to push back on? Because that's also why I'm here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassidy, the second C in CMC Financial. So Dad sometimes gets on a roll with this podcast and might forget to remind you about a few things. 1, don't forget to like and share this podcast and leave a review. 2, follow CMC Financial on all of the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And 3, go check out the website at cmcfp.com. Okay, back to my dad. He's probably still talking.
Okay, so let's move away from the wedding. I'm going to take a step back. Okay. You mentioned engagement parties. So obviously an engagement party happens before the wedding. What are you seeing trend-wise with engagement parties? Or is that all over the place?
No, engagement parties are huge now.
Okay.
Thank you to social media.
Okay.
Because again, it's what can we post? What can we do that is flashy and big? And, we've got huge balloon situations, and we've got signs and marquee lights, and we want the whole family and all of the friends. It is huge sometimes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we, at what point in the engagement are you seeing this? Is this the Saturday night when everybody knows they're getting engaged except for the bride? Or is this something that happens after the fact?
A little bit of both. Most of the time, though, it is happening that night.
Okay.
It is a big surprise party. The whole family is there. All of the friends are there, and it's a big production.
Okay. So who's planning this? Where are you getting the phone calls? Or is this something that you're getting the phone call of, or is this a group of girls are planning this? What does it depend?
It depends, but I would say from my experience, it's usually parents. Both sets of parents have come together to host this party for both of their children.
Okay.
It's not that I have seen leaning more towards, rehearsal dinner generally is the groom's family, wedding is the bride's family. But on the engagement party, most families are coming together to do it.
Okay, so what's happening at an engagement party? Just everybody congratulating, getting pictures with the ring. What are we? And the only reason I know this because this was what I see on social media.
That's right.
So that's what you talked about.
Right.
Is this is a social media event?
Absolutely. So you'll have the photographer there.
Okay.
It may not be the same photographer that you hire for the wedding.
Oh, okay.
But you will have a photographer there.
Okay.
I haven't seen a lot of social media vendors, I would say, at engagement parties. That's not to say we may not end up there, especially as I see this evolving with photographers having that in-house as a service. But yeah, engagement parties are as big sometimes as the wedding, where, you're having full catering, full bar, you've got all these interactives, as I like to call them. So photo ops, bride and groom taking pictures with the family, with their friends. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is it really a surprise for the bride? Does it depend?
Well, most of the time when the bride shows up and her nails are freshly done, and you know, generally the friends have tipped her off.
Yeah. Okay.
Which
okay.
I appreciate because no one wants to arrive in their sweatpants.
Oh, well, let me tell you, if one of my girls ever arrives and their nails aren't done, somebody's in trouble.
That's
because
right.
somebody did not give them the heads up.
That's exactly right. Yes, you know the drill.
I can 100% promise
Yes.
you that. Who's paying for the engagement party?
So like I said, generally for engagement parties, it's both families that are coming together.
Okay.
It's kind of the gray area where it's not, this is your responsibility or mine. We're truly bringing both families together to celebrate both kids.
Okay. Is this generally a budget item that me as a financial planner, I'm going to have conversations about, 10 years ahead where we start talking about, okay, when you start putting some money away for a wedding, is this kind of part of that, or is it different, or is it evolving?
I would say it is a part of it.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, why wouldn't it be a part of it?
Okay.
Right. When, other than those other family milestones, when would you spend X thousands of dollars on a party?
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
mean, I think it absolutely falls into that bucket.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about so the night before the wedding, we generally have a rehearsal dinner. Okay. Is that something that you're involved with as well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about rehearsal dinners. What are the lead ups to that? And how does that work?
So very similar to planning the wedding day, we're also looking at venue.
Okay.
We're looking at catering. We're looking at bar service. We are looking at linens, flowers, decor, invitations. It really is as detailed, sometimes more than the wedding. You may have a wedding that's a buffet style reception, there's open seating, but for the rehearsal dinner, you may want to have assigned seating. So then you're very meticulously placing your family and friends together, and everyone is looking at every detail.
Okay. Okay. Is when you have those, that's generally an invited list of people. Are there generally like assigned seats and signed things like that?
Generally, absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of the rule of thumb is if you've invited a guest from out of town, you generally do invite them to the rehearsal dinner.
Okay.
So sometimes even though your bridal party may be X number of people, if you've got out of town guests, you want to invite them and host them.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of final questions before we kind of wrap up. What's the most unusual request you've ever had as an event planner for a wedding?
Oh my gosh, this is actually really, really hard. The most unusual request. Okay, so I had a bride. Do you know those fun runs where they have the packets of color?
Yeah.
Color runs or whatever. So after the wedding, she wanted everyone to go outside and have these huge bursts of packets of color. And I had to kindly ask her if she wanted to remain that way for the duration of the evening, because you're not washing that off.
Right.
And she absolutely wanted to have color all over her dress and her friends and the whole 9 yards. And I thought, this is such an odd request. Can we not wait until the very end of the night? Can we not wait until everyone has had a few too many drinks? So that was an odd request for me.
So what you're saying is when they're running through, when we used to throw rice before the birds, and then we threw bird seed, and then we blew bubbles.
Yes.
Now her request was this fun run color.
That's right.
Wow.
That's
okay.
right.
That's unusual.
It was unusual. Yeah. Probably not the craziest thing I've ever seen, but definitely unusual.
Okay. So what's the craziest thing you've ever seen?
Oh, well, Jim, people get a little bit wild at weddings.
Okay.
And I have seen everything from tablecloths on fire.
Oh, wow.
People have had their hair on fire. Draping has caught up. A lot of fires.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
actual fires to put out.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So I will wrap up with this, and that's sometimes I like the food at the receptions. Okay. Now, a trend that I've seen, maybe this is in the South, maybe it's not, but a mashed potato bar or a macaroni and cheese bar at a wedding reception to me is one of the most phenomenal things that you could have.
I am partial to this probably because I do love mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese.
Okay.
But I do love it and I hope it never goes away.
Right.
So I agree with you on that.
And I would assume it's a little less expensive than some of the other.
It can be.
Than some of the other choices.
That's right. It can be.
Well, Amanda, this has been fun.
Yay.
This has been something we've talked about doing for a while. Again, this is part 1. We're going to do part 2 where we're talking about other events, other types of events that you've been involved with. But this has been a ton of fun. If somebody wanted to contact you about event planning, wedding, how would they do that?
Yeah. So You can always call me, text me. My number is 205-919-5859, or you can email me an ARRAH, ARRAH, planning and design @gmail.com.
Okay. Thanks a lot. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. And then
great.
RJ for CMC Financial, that's cmcfp.com. My direct number is 205-510-9074. We are on all the social medias, which we have talked about because Jim is getting involved with
That's
that.
right.
So Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And then check out our YouTube channel as well. So.
Jim, I feel very happy. My training of you is really paying off. You're just jumping in, giving out the information. I don't have to remind you.
I'm trying. Yes.
You are just the best. I have to say that.
Maybe it's the spring air that has
That's right.
happened.
Could
Maybe
be.
that's what it is.
Could be. All right. Thank you, Jim and Amanda. And most importantly, thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook podcast. We ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review because this actually helps others find the show. Again, thank you for listening. And for everyone at the Financial Puzzle Playbook, I'm RJ Malik, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Don't forget to follow us on social media by checking the links in the description. And contact us today by visiting our website at www.cmcfp.com or give us a call at 205-510-9074. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of CMC Financial. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by CMC Financial or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, CMC Financial, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.